All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. This is a roundtable on the Special Needs Scholarship Program. We're going to do a quick whip around of the folks that are here with us in person, and they're going to tell us their name and what school they're from.
Sharon Wallace here from Emmanuel Lutheran School in Brookfield.
Matt Fall from Emmanuel Lutheran School in Brookfield.
Ellen Hayden from the Lumen Schools in Milwaukee.
Janelle Meinzer from the Lumen Schools in Milwaukee.
Mike Derrick, Principal, Mary Queen of Saints Academy.
Lori Sucker from Mesmer Catholic Schools in Milwaukee.
Erin Janetsky, Martin Luther High School in Greendale.
So the first question we're going to ask is, from each of the schools represented here, how many SNSP students does your school serve, and how many years have you been in the program?
At Emmanuel, we've been in the program for 3 years. This is the third year, and we currently have 24 students enrolled.
At the Lumen Schools in Milwaukee, we have 16 or 17 students across all of our students, and this is the third year that we've been in the SNSP.
This is our first year at Mary Queen of Saints in the SNSP, and we currently serve 2 students.
This is our first year at Mesmer in the SNSP program, and we currently serve 4 students.
This is our third year in the program, and we currently serve 10 students.
And so one of the first questions I was curious about is, how did each school determine the number of seats it would offer?
Sure. So we had looked at our current student population and then looked at the current guidelines that the state had put out regarding the SNSP to see which of our current students would qualify each year. So that's why this year, because the requirements changed, we were able to add so many more students. And then also some of our incoming students also met requirements. So we were able to just readjust our count a couple of times in order to accommodate those students.
At the Lumen Schools, we did something very similar. We took into account how many students would qualify for it initially. When the SNSP first began, it was a lot more rigorous of a process for qualification. But we've kind of assessed every year how many students would qualify, as well as we also had to keep in mind when we first began the financial piece of it, the surety bond. We just kind of started out slow and wanted to see how everything was going to work, and if we could have the finances to make that work. Yes.
We also decided to take a look at our students and who we were serving with special needs already, and just base our number of seats that we would offer based on that. And we started it only at the high school because we wanted to start out slowly. We plan on adding it at our elementary sites next year, also using the same methodology.
It sounds like the same across the board a little bit. We too just looked at the students who we could already serve who had IEPs. Obviously, the process was a little bit harder that first year. And we actually have a number of seats open because we look at it as an opportunity for students to come in. So we also keep it at a percentage of our students. We don't want to go over a certain percentage because we want to make sure that we're able to serve all of them.
Great, thanks. Obviously, the state requires a lot of reporting for compliance. I'm wondering if you could take us through some of the schools that have been in the program for a while, some of the major pieces that schools need to have in place for reporting for compliance with the program.
Well, I'll start and then you can chime in. There's 2 main areas, the application and the audit. So the application has a lot of paperwork requirements, very similar to voucher, the other choice programs. Proof of residence, making sure you know that what school district and address is in, making sure the parents' names are, consistently spelled correctly. All that application paperwork matches, and there's requirements on the school as far as documenting that whole process. An added component with the application is talking to public school districts too. There's some email correspondence requirements there. And then the other main area is the audit, and that's basically making sure you can document what money was spent on students that are in the program.
Then there's the quarterly progress reports that are due for each student that have to be completed quarterly. And then there's the other reports, the preliminary enrollment report and the third Friday count report, which are not difficult, but just time consuming.
I have to agree with everything that was said. It's a good process.
Yeah.
You guys doing any differently or?
No, I think part of it is, it's just, there's a lot kind of at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's time consuming, and then there's just these little things throughout that you just have to kind of keep track of to make sure that you're hitting all the right dates and everything.
I think being in year 3, something I've learned is that you want to be able to provide that documentation, especially to the auditor, right? So keeping careful records and being able to say, this student was serviced. You might have staff that service all of your students, including the ones in the special needs scholarship program. So you have to have a way to break down what was spent on this student. There's lots of different ways to go about the accounting and the audit, but just more documentation is better.
We keep a file per student, so then every year when they re-enroll, basically with the re-enrolls, all you have to have is their proof of residency again. That goes right in the front of the folder, and then I write on the front of the folder the year, and then if there was an address change and when we received it. So it's all just right there for the auditor as far as looking at application stuff.
Got it. I wanted to touch on 2 pieces. One is the modified service agreement at the beginning of the program, and then those quarterly progress reports. What do your modified service agreements look like? What do they include? How detailed are they?
So we use a modified IEP at a glance form. So they include student and parent demographic information, so address, phone number, the nature of the student's disability, the current services being provided, including how many minutes per week and who is providing those services. And then this year we did add very broad student goals to those modified agreements.
Yeah, we do something similar. All of those things, we use goals, we list the student's strengths and
Yes,
also
we
the
do that
areas
too.
of concerns, as well as any parent concerns. And then we also list the accommodations and modifications that are recommended for the classroom for the regular ed teacher as well. We have a special education teacher that works with our students, so she comes up with those and then is able to dialogue with the regular ed teacher to help the student in the classroom in addition to what she can do for them.
We have a very similar thing. We also include, both classroom and then testing modifications. And we also do have their last test scores for us. It's ACT Aspire usually. And so just so we can see their growth with that, we show that so they can see, where they've come from. I will, as their incoming students, find hopefully their last either MAPS or STARS or whatever, standardized tests they took and put that on there. And that just helps some people to see like, okay, they're really, their math is higher than their reading. So that might mean they enjoy it. So those are, just little things that teachers can see that help them.
Great. And what about the quarterly progress reports? What does that tend to look like at your schools?
So ours are very simple because unless you're changing the service plan, there's a couple of sections that can stay the same throughout the year. So basically then it's the bottom section is a progress toward those goals. So it kind of depends who's working with the student. If it's a speech language student, that the speech language pathologist then might include progress toward the goal that they're working on.
We use the DPI's progress report form for the SNSP. I don't know. We have not created our own quarterly reports. We just use the ones that are provided from DPI on the SNSP website, which that's what, yeah.
Yep.
Same, yep. And we also, being with, we obviously change classes 8 times a day with being in the high school. And so I will ask teachers for some comments as well, just to almost just like a report card, progress report and for them to write down, if they've been working really hard, just a couple quick comments, just so the parent can see.
All right, great. And one of the things is we're gonna put together a toolkit. I think we have some tools already live on the School Choice Wisconsin Action website, but if there are other things that you might find valuable for folks who are in year one and are willing to share, we'd love to get those up on the website as well. I would love to take a look at them personally. So what personnel do you have in place, service students in the SNSP at your schools? And it might vary depending on, or it could be networks. Do you share personnel across networks? So I'll stop there because that was like 2 or 3 questions.
So at Emmanuel, we went from 3 and 4 students to this year over 20. So that's a pretty big jump. And so Matt is our student services coordinator, because it's just a lot to coordinate. We have a speech and language therapist. We also have a special education teacher and another 2 hours of tutoring from a teacher. And then we would bring in by contract other services. I don't think we have any right at the moment through SNSP.
The vision, we have a
Oh,
vision,
vision.
we have a vision specialist.
Oh,
We have
yeah.
one student with a vision impairment. So we were able to contract with an organization called Vision Forward that then provides us with a vision specialist teacher once per week.
And an audiologist that we consult with for hearing impairment.
We currently have one special education teacher, and she does travel between our schools, so it's not ideal, and we're looking for another one. But yeah, and so she provides the primary services. Of course, we have Title I as well that our students can participate in. And then we have a nurse as well who can handle some of the more physical, like for hearing screenings and things like that, but about it.
We have one learning support coordinator who's dealing with all the applications and working on the services plans. And then we have a reading specialist who works with some of the students. That's really all that we have right now. That's all that we need. We'll acquire what we need as we need it.
So we have 2 teachers who are, we call it a guided studies. They are the ones who see our students for the majority of it. They're the ones who give them those services for the most of the day, but a lot of our just regular ed teachers are taking on that task, just partly because the nature of being in a classroom, but that's where our testing modifications can happen. Students are, myself included, sometimes depending on what class it is, that's where we can pull students out and do that testing or doing assignments and things outside of class, but a lot of ours does happen in just the regular ed with those teachers.
And we do have an outside chat question that's come in on that regard. Why not use the IEP or service plan that was developed for you? Why create a modified version? This person says they make the IEP or service plan fit what we offer when we meet annually. So the modified IEP is required by statute for the program. Although you might choose to adopt the IEP as written, you just need to document that. So does someone want to speak to that? And then Mike, a second question that's come in, if we could circle back to the quarterly plans. This person says that their first round of these quarterly progress reports are mostly anecdotal notes at this point. I think the question is wondering whether that's appropriate and based on your experience, and then they've suggested updates potentially for the modified plan in that progress report, if I'm understanding this correctly. So I think that one, they're bouncing it off you all of whether or not they feel like that's an appropriate way to handle the progress reports out of the gate for that first round. So 2 questions online.
Yeah, and I'll go, I mean, I can speak for Mary Queen of Saints for the first question of why do a modified service agreement? And it just might be with 2 students in the program, we might not be able to provide all the services that are included in the student's IEP. And we're making parents aware that if they do choose to attend their local public school, they are entitled to these things. Whereas at Mary Queen of Saints, this is what we can do. And of course, we would love it if you chose our school and stayed with us, but you are giving up some of these services if you choose to attend Mary Queen of Saints.
Yep, that's exactly right. And as Carol said, it is required by SNSP that parents do sign and agree to the modified plan of services.
Sometimes after working with a student, our plan looks different than the IEP did when it was constructed, and it may not be fewer services, it may actually be more, but our knowledge of the student and in a lot of cases, we've had these students in our buildings and we know them well, so we feel that we can address the needs from where we see them too with that modified agreement.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Sharon, that we are able to offer things too that the public schools might not be able to, and that might also be reflected in the modified service agreement.
And the other thing, as you said, an IEP is written as if a student were going to be in a public school building specifically. So it lists specific people that will be carrying out those services. It's written very much as public school designed, so.
All right, then we'll circle back to the quarterly progress report. Our anecdotal notes okay for the quarterly progress report? Would you recommend that schools update plans, especially thinking back to year 1 when you're just kind of dabbling in the creation of those plans?
I think the first, as many of us are probably getting right to the first quarter right now, it's just kind of like how it is kind of just that anecdotal of, we're doing really well in this spot, but this spot might need some help. I don't necessarily think that's where I would do the modifications personally, but I think it is just a progress report. Again, it's not saying they have to have this grade. They are not, they don't have to move from this spot to this spot. It is just helping that parent see. So you chose to be in our school and you are getting those things done. You are meeting these goals. You're getting, this service.
I think it depends on the question. Is the person asking, do they have to use the DPI report form?
No, I don't believe that was the question. I think the question is just, first of all, as you've mentioned, the anecdotal notes might be completely appropriate, particularly that first quarter. And then secondly, if the school is realizing that perhaps they need to approach the educational plan slightly differently, would this be an appropriate mechanism to use to communicate that to the parents that perhaps we should consider A, B, C?
I believe there is a spot on that report that if you have modified the plan since it was signed, it does need to be noted on the quarterly progress report. I don't remember exactly.
I think the top box is there, the middle box is that. But I would still just personally probably have that parent come in and say, this is what we've noticed in the first 9 weeks or whatever your quarter is. And I would actually probably have them re-sign. I would make up a new document, still keep the old one in there, but put modified, whatever, and have them re-sign it.
That sounds like a great suggestion.
And who's doing that? Who's doing the quarterly progress reports at your respective schools? Are you asking, is it classroom teachers doing these anecdotal notes? Is it a specialist?
We have the service provider would be step 1. So if the service provider is a special education teacher, then that person can judge how well the goals are being reached and what progress is being made. If it's a speech and language pathologist, then that would be that person. If it was OT or PT or whatever, it really depends on what's in the plan as far as who would know progress. I think the classroom teacher, to me, that's more the report card. And this is in addition to the report card. So we're at Emmanuel, we're looking for the support staff, in addition to the classroom teacher, this progress report is written by the additional support provider.
Because we always send it with our report card, so.
That's how we do it as well.
That form actually comes out of my office with talking with the teachers who have those students in class, you know, whether it's just the 7 teachers they have. I also meet with the students. I try to meet with them quarterly, even if I don't have, you know, if I don't see them often enough. There's some students I see all the time and some students I see, you know, minimally just because of whatever their needs are. And so I think just having that conversation with them too is asking them how they're feeling and able to give that report from my office.
Thanks. Have any of your schools worked with a blended learning program? There may be schools like ours where maybe we don't have enough students in the SNSP to hire someone to work with students. So have you had any experience with any blended learning programs that have worked for your schools?
We have a couple blended learning programs that we use for all of our students. We use Zern and Alex, I think, for the math, and then Raz Kids, and so it's for similar things for the ELA. And so our students in SNSP use those blended learning modules as well. We have one school in Racine, and Racine Unified offers a blended program for a service plan for students with a learning disability in the area of reading, and they use Lexia. And they said that that is very successful. So that's our experience.
Similar.
Thanks. Do you provide professional development for regular ed staff members with regards to your participation in the SNSP? And if so, what types of things do you do?
I want to say our professional development has not necessarily changed just because of the special needs scholarship program. I think we look at the needs of our students and teachers as a whole, and especially for staff development, which is not as personalized, it's whole group. It's needs of the whole school, students, teachers. This year we happen to be focusing on trauma sensitive instruction, but we have a different focus every year. I don't know that we have changed because of the special needs scholarship.
I would agree. I've been doing PDs on how to accommodate and modify in the classroom before the special needs scholarship program even began, and so it's relevant. I guess it's even more relevant as we are getting more students with special needs, but it was relevant before as well. So we've done the same.
Same, I would always speak on that of how to do modifications, things like that. But actually, this fall with Greendale, we will be doing I don't want to say special, but we will be doing a focused professional development on autism, as we have more and more students who are on the spectrum somewhere, and they want to do that. So I don't know, depending on what district you're in, partly they have to because there's money there that they have to put into us, but I feel like that will benefit not just the students who are part of SNSP, but for a lot of our students in our building.
No, we have done, myself and our special education teacher, we have gone to more professional development opportunities ourselves to become better educated on things to utilize and implement at school, and then we share that with the appropriate teaching staff that that would benefit from that information.
Agreed. I think I seek those out more to be able to help when there are questions.
I'd like to go back to some of the different services that your schools provide. One of the areas that I think is particularly relevant is speech and language. And so it sounds like Emmanuel Lutheran has their own, you hired your own speech and language pathologist.
We contracted with an individual that was providing services to one of our students, and that's how we got to know her. And so not necessarily directly on our payroll, more of a contracted service. But she does see all of the students in our building that need speech and language services. She's the only one that sees the students that need speech and language.
And my understanding is because speech and language qualifies under federal IDEA, local districts would still have to provide speech and language services just as they would if you were not a participant in SNSP.
That is correct, but in the Elmbrook School District, they will not come to our school and provide those services. Families have to drive their students to a public school. So for many students, that was not an option for parents during the day to take off of work and transport their kids. So this was a great help to us. I think we have 12 of our 24 students are speech language only. So it's been a great opportunity for us to bring that person on and provide those services internally rather than have to send them out somewhere else.
In the high school, usually speech and language is not, I don't want to say not existent, but usually most students graduate from that before they get to high school, so we don't have any in our speech and language.
If any,
We primarily do the speech and language through the public schools. So we work with Milwaukee Public Schools, Racine Unified, and Wauwatosa Public Schools. They come out to, there might be wait lists and other criteria, but they come out to the schools to provide those services. And recently we are working in conjunction with Concordia University as well, and they're developing a speech and language program there, and so we're going to be a site for them for their clinical students.
Mike, we have a question online. How detailed do the reports need to be for the audit when it comes to these services? For instance, do weekly teacher schedules suffice, or do they need to provide detailed daily meeting and that service that's provided? And let's preface this answer to what's been true thus far in the SNSP, which has not allowed for the high cost piece, which is brand new this year. Let's answer this at the moment with just the base special needs scholarship voucher amount, and how do you have to, what kind of detailed records do you need when it comes audit time about cost?
To my knowledge, they have been pretty vague with what they've actually required. So we have stuck with just what services are being provided. So for example, I'm a counselor, so I will put on that initial plan, meeting with the student 2 times a month for 30 minutes. And then also then providing documentation then that service is happening, so that at the end of the year, we can go back and say, yes, I met with that student for 30 minutes twice a month.
And then any parent meetings, other, so there's the direct services, but then there's, other meetings and stuff like that. We have just used a teacher's schedule, notes that we had this meeting this long, and, tracking it that way, and that's been fine with our audit.
Okay, so relatively general. You're not having to come up with a daily log.
No.
No, not daily, no.
Excellent, thank you.
all right. So how do you track, there's a big one. How do you track expenses? I'll leave it there right now. How do you track expenses?
Well, Lori probably knows these details. So when you have a contracted service, that's easy, right? Because here's your invoice, done. When it is a shared teacher, then it gets a lot more complicated. So your special education teacher sees lots of children, and some of them are in the SNSP, some of them aren't. So then I guess the way I keep it straight in my head is there's a cost for a general education in the school. And so there's that cost that's going to be there for a student, any student that's in the school. And we know that costs just exactly, down to the penny, because we have to, because we're also in the choice program. If you're not, then that would be a whole new world. So you track that cost of education. What is that for a general student, average, on average, take the number of kids, divide by, and then services over and above that, then also qualify. So if you have a special education teacher, you can't count them twice, right? So let's say you have a special education teacher and they're serving the whole school, and so you build in their salary into the cost of education because they're there for the whole school. Well, then you can't take 5 hours of their time and count it again for SNSP. That doesn't make any sense, right? So, you know, that's the trade-off, and that's where it gets a little more complicated when it's a shared service. Students who are not in the program and students who are. But that's just a matter of figuring out a system and sticking to it. The easy part, and maybe easier for a first, you know, getting into the program, we had speech and language contracted. We went through Health Reach in the beginning, and that was a good resource for us. But those invoices, that's the easiest thing. You know, the audiologist that comes in and consults and gives you an invoice.